Freud presented his ideas on dreams to the world in 1899 in one of his most controversial books. He called it simply The Interpretation of Dreams.
When Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams, it sold less than 100 copies initially. I mean, it was a book that had initially no resound in the world.
Reviews of The Interpretation of Dreams were few and unflattering, and Freud's theories were condemned as repugnant.
Freudianism is digging down into the sewage of our moods and appetites, dreams and passions.
Dr. Freud lives in the fairyland of dreams among the ogres of perverted sex.
His theories lend themselves with terrible ease to the uses of ignorance and quackery.
These theories were frightening to a great many people. They certainly challenged the establishment. I think it would be an exaggeration to say that people thought he was insane, although I'm sure there were some who did.
Dogged by resistance to change, Freud faced an uphill battle.
There followed a period of absolute helplessness. At that time, I would gladly have dropped the whole thing. Perhaps I persevered only because I had no longer any choice of beginning something else.
But Freud had confidence in his work, and he remained committed to his theories. In the early 1900s, a small number of like-minded men became interested in Freud's new science, psychoanalysis. At first, the group met in Freud's apartment to hear him lecture and discuss his theories. As Freud's reputation grew, so did his circle of supporters. And in time, psychoanalytic societies sprang up in Vienna, Zurich, and New York. Over the next 20 years, Freud published more than a dozen books and wrote volumes of letters, papers, and articles. Though he did revise his theory that all hysteria was caused by sexual abuse, Freud continued to provoke the mainstream. He developed new theories on everything from the components of the mind to childhood sexuality. Soon, terms like ego, superego, the id, and the Freudian slip all became household words. But just as Freud's ideas began to take hold, Freud became ill. In 1923, as a result of a lifelong addiction to cigars, Freud was diagnosed with mouth cancer. He battled the disease for the next 16 years and endured dozens of painful operations in the process. Over time, both his speech and hearing became permanently affected.
He had a whole side of his face, his jaw, replaced with a prosthesis. Painful to wear, painful to take out, painful to put back in. Just a horrible illness.
In the midst of Freud's battle with cancer, an even greater battle was spreading throughout Europe. In the 1930s, the Nazis began their rise to power, and in 1938, Sigmund Freud looked on with horror as the Germans occupied Austria. The Nazis condemned Freud's psychoanalytic theories as Jewish pornography, and they burned his books.
What progress we are making. In the Middle Ages, they would have burnt me. Nowadays, they are content with burning my books.
Fearing for his safety, Freud's friends and supporters, both in the United States and England, began urging him to flee Vienna, but Freud was reluctant to leave.
This is where he had grown up, this is where he had his education, this was where he had so many attachments. It was really a part of his identity and part of his life.
It wasn't until the Gestapo arrested his daughter Anna for questioning that Freud realized that he and his family could no longer safely remain in Austria. And in June of 1938, Freud left Vienna for London. Freud spent the last year of his life very ill, but surrounded by friends, family, and supporters. He died in exile in 1939. More than 60 years after his death, the pioneering work of Sigmund Freud is being carried on by thousands of psychoanalysts around the world. And what began as an effort to treat the mentally ill is today helping people from all walks of life.
There's an openness in society today that can be traced directly back to some of the Freudian thought and theory and how things have shifted. We are a society that talks very freely about our inner feelings, about our conflicts, about sex, sexuality. This is all part of the Freudian revolution.